Civil Miscellaneous Matter 19-80005, Ingrid DMCA subpoena to Reddit Inc. Counsel, please come to the podium and state your appearances.
Paul D. Polidoro, representing Watchtower. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Alex Moss from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, representing the Doe Movement.
Good morning. So I have a couple of questions. I did read the pleadings and some of the cases that were cited, so I think I'm up to speed, but I had some questions about things that were ambiguous, and also I have an idea of how I wanted to proceed, so I wanted to float it with you guys and see if there are any problems with it. So first of all, let me just start with my questions, if that's okay. Mr. Polidoro, would Watchtower be able to file suit against darksilver to protect copyright claims if I were to quash the subpoena with regard to darksilver's identity?
No, Your Honor. There would be no other way for us to find out who the poster is.
Okay. And if I don't quash the subpoena and allow darksilver's identity to be revealed, what assurances could Watchtower give me to protect darksilver's identity from being disclosed publicly in the lawsuit, or basically to darksilver's congregation, which it seems like that's what darksilver's concerned about?
Yeah, that does seem the concern, Your Honor. And I don't know what efforts can be taken. I can make the representation to you that Watchtower will not publicly disseminate his name. I will make the representation to you that our interest is to move forward to deal with the copyright infringements.
Okay.
What we have here is something a little bit unusual, Your Honor. We have an individual who, one, reposted something that was on jw.org, but two, posted something that was not publicly available. As part of our dealing with the infringement, I think we need to identify who that is and cut off that access for future infringements.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what I was thinking about this, and I want to hear from both sides as to what the downsides would be, because I mulled it over in my own mind, but obviously have not thought about what the implications are. I can't think of all the implications. What if I were to order that darksilver's identity is provided to Watchtower on an attorney's eyes only basis, and then if Watchtower decides to file suit for copyright infringement, Watchtower has to maintain the anonymity. In other words, it has to be versus John Doe. And I know that might not be in my court. And that I would allow, then if it's here, obviously I'd be the person making the decisions on that. But if it's in some other jurisdiction where darksilver is being sued, that judge can then make the balancing decision about First Amendment versus copyright infringement. Because one of the concerns that I have right now is that I don't know if I'm not sure if I have enough information to make substantive determinations about the copyright viability and the defense of fair use, but I'm worried that I don't want to allow people to infringe copyrights potentially with an anonymous posting. And so that was my idea about how it proceed, but let me hear from both sides as to what you think the problems with that would be, so I could mull those over as well. And let me start with Mr. Polidoro, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Moss.
Your Honor, first I would need to share it with my forensic team.
I'm sorry?
I would need to share the information with my forensic team in moving forward in order to...
We have a model protective order in the Northern District of California that has allows for people who are working as experts with an attorney's eyes only, on an attorney's eyes only basis. They sign an affidavit, but they're bound by their protective order as well. So that makes sense. Okay.
And I think there's another more real world problem, Your Honor. Maybe I can illustrate it this way. What if you had someone in Universal Studios who was violating Universal's copyright, but also disseminating Universal's protected copyright matters that they did not want publicly disseminated? I think Universal would have the opportunity to identify who that individual is and cut off their access. In order for me to move forward, I'm going to need to work with my forensic team to identify who this is and cut off their access to confidential information. So that's a bit broader scope than I think Your Honor is envisioning.
And so my idea is that if I were to allow the identity of darksilver to be revealed on an attorney's eyes only basis, whoever the judge is going forward would be able to make a decision then about, okay, now you can reveal it to these people, you can reveal it to those people because you need to do something else in addition to just suing for copyright infringement. You want to cut off the access to confidential information, which seems slightly different from copyright infringement. That seems like that's not a copyright claim, because if that, in other words, you didn't register that document 2 is what I'll call it. Let's just, document 2 is the one that's, you say contains confidential information. That's more like a trade secret issue, not a copyright issue. So I understand that you would want to do that, but I would, in essence, be saying if you got to that point and you needed to you wanted to cut off access, then you could come back to the court, wherever that is, either me or someone else, and say, now at this point we need to share it with these additional individuals in order to cut off access. Something like that. And then the court could make a balancing decision again. Would Your Honor consider retaining jurisdiction as we move forward? I don't know if I can. I mean, I think that jurisdiction is jurisdiction. I mean, in other words, it's preserved until the Supreme Court. Like, let's say I retain jurisdiction and you fought it all with the Supreme Court, which something like this could go, and the Supreme Court says, you know what, Judge Kim never had jurisdiction to begin with. I've seen that happen. That literally does happen because the court at any point in time could say, if you don't have jurisdiction, you're gone. That's my only concern. So, okay, let me hear from Ms. Moss about my crazy plan.
I hear where Your Honor is coming from. Mm-hmm. And frankly, in a lot of other situations, that might work. But as our client declaration makes clear, their concern is disclosure of their identity to anyone in or affiliated with Watchtower. Frankly, they don't have generic concerns about disclosing their name to individuals outside of that organization. And if there were a solution, what might make sense is there's the case from District of Columbia, Washington Times, where the court appointed an independent third-party designee. The reason we can't, in good faith, actually advocate that, Your Honor, is because all of the information on the record is all of the information anyone will need to figure out the copyright issues. So if that third-party designee couldn't give our client's name to Watchtower, it's not clear that they would have anything to do. And this is also different from other cases because our client is out more than 100 miles from any court. So this isn't a situation where we could give the information to a third party and then they could go ahead and proceed. There's no relevance of our client's name to figuring out what the images. We know what they look like. We know when they were posted. We know where they were posted.
But Watchtower can't serve a lawsuit unless they know who the defendant is.
I would say, Your Honor, that we would, although jurisdiction, of course, is separate, we would be willing to agree to service a process at the Electronic Frontier Foundation to accept that. And to the extent, Your Honor, that, as you said, the confidentiality concerns are not copyright claims. If they're concerned about access and distribution, frankly, the distributor of this speech was read at a U.S. platform.
Well, let me ask you this, Ms. Moss, because you're assuming that Mr. Polidoro, who is a lawyer for Watchtower, is going to then cause the excommunication, whatever process, disfellowshipping process to begin. I mean, literally, if I had said, Mr. Polidoro can get access to this identity of the person, that he is going to be the person that then causes the disfellowshipping to occur. Or he's violating the protective order because he's telling other people beyond the scope of their protective order who darksilver is.
If this were any other circumstance, I think we'd be having a different conversation, but I can't, in good faith, knowing my client's concerns, agree to a solution that wouldn't address them.
Okay, that's not good enough for me because what you're saying is that your client believes that either Mr. Polidoro is going to disfellowship or he's going to violate the protective order.
Well, I think, Your Honor, our client is so afraid of their identity being disclosed, and I think it's not unreasonable to recognize that once information is disclosed, there is a risk. I've worked on cases with source code protection. You're supposed to lock the drawer. Things happen. And this isn't a situation, frankly, where we're dealing with outside retained counsel at another firm where we would know that all the information was outside the physical possession. We don't have that. I'd also say in these pleadings, they've talked about how other targets of subpoenas, whether they still belong or not to the organization. And I think that shows that information gained in these subpoenas is being connected. And in fact, given what I've heard my friends say here, I haven't heard the kind of assurance. I've heard they'll have to go back and talk to people at Watchtower. So I haven't heard the kind of assurance that you're suggesting. And, in the documents we've provided, one of the situations of disfellowshipping was someone's wife talking about them. I mean, our clients' fears are well-founded. And, again, I think the right solution would be, if that were one, would be an independent court-appointed designee who's completely neutral where there's no concern. And I think part of that is these are matters of religious faith and internal conscience. Okay.
So, Mr. Polidoro, what is the relationship between Watchtower and the religious organization? Are they separate entities? Is there a structure? I don't know nothing about this. Can you tell me about that?
Sure, Your Honor. Watchtower, Pennsylvania owns the intellectual property that Jehovah's Witnesses use.
And what is Watchtower, Pennsylvania? 501c3? 501? Is it an organization?
Yes. It's a tax-exempt organization. If Your Honor looked at the Watchtower versus Stratton case. That was, the party in that case was Watchtower, New York, which had at that time supervisory activity over Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States. So Jehovah's Witnesses use a variety of corporations to advance different aspects of their work. Watchtower, Pennsylvania, who I represent, represents Watchtower's interest in intellectual property.
So Watchtower, Pennsylvania, what about the religious organization? Is there a separate entity that is a religious organization, or is it one and the same as Watchtower?
No, it's a separate entity. Watchtower is a corporate entity, a 501c entity that holds the copyrights. Watchtower, Pennsylvania, who I represent.
Okay.
There is a religious structure. And is that what Your Honor would like to hear about?
And what's the relationship between the two?
They're separate. They're separate. I work with a corporate entity. I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I am a member of a religious order, and I work with them. But there's a separate religious theocratic entity. There's a governing body, which is a group of elders that oversees global activity. There's local branches. For example, in the United States, there's a U.S. branch that would oversee activities in the United States, and then there are local congregations.
Okay. Who makes the decisions about disfellowshipping?
That would be a local congregation decision, Your Honor.
And is there is that policy of disfellowshipping, is that written in some type of religious treatise or document?
It absolutely is, Your Honor. I could share with you, if you like, if Your Honor looks at jw.org, which is our official website, there's a section on disfellowshipping. And what I can do, Your Honor, if you would like, is I can give you a current printout of jw.org, which talks about the disfellowshipping process.
As long as you also give a copy to opposing counsel within a couple days.
I have one for both.
Okay, great.
And if I could just pass this up, Judge. Just give me one moment. That's for Your Honor. Did I give you two or one, Judge?
Yes.
May have given you counsel's copy also. And Judge, just so that we understand when we speak about what the disfellowshipping process is, if I might, that's a scripturally based procedure. And in the book of James, it says if someone's in spiritual trouble, go to the older men, and they will help him. If he's committed sins, it will be forgiven. They're guided by Galatians 6:1. Readjust a person in a position of mildness. That individual's relationship with God has somehow been disturbed. The local elders will meet with that individual, go over Bible principles. If an individual is engaged in some wrongdoing, then they stop, not disfellowship. The purpose of a judicial committee is not to disfellowship, it's to restore someone's relationship with God. So if you had someone who was committing theft repeatedly, the elders would meet with him or her and say, you really need to stop this behavior. If they do and they're repentant, they stay within the congregation. If they say to the elders, I don't care, I'm going to continue to break the law, I'm going to continue to break God's law, and then that's when disfellowshipping is considered.
Okay. But there is a process for it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I understand. So let me talk about the specific documents. I'm going to call the first document the advertisement. I know there's dispute about what to call it, but just for purposes of for clarity, I'm going to call it the advertisement. So with regard to the advertisement, did Watchtower register the advertisement as a separate document or as part of the November 28th issue of the Watchtower?
I believe it was part of the issue of the Watchtower.
Okay, great. And with regard to the document number 2, the chart, I'm just going to call that the chart, that's not copyrighted, correct?
It's not registered.
Okay. So, and you're claiming that there's confidential information in that?
There was information that we prepared for use internally among the branches.
Are you alleging a trade secret allegation against?
No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. That was a form that was created to address a ongoing matter with respect to compliance with the GDPR.
Okay. And Ms. Moss, let me ask you a couple of questions. When darksilver posted the advertisement, this is the document number 1, what changes, if any, or additions, if any, did darksilver make to the advertisement? I just wanted to make sure I had completely understood what darksilver did with the posting.
So, of course, our client took a screenshot of the image. So as you can see, what we've used in our brief is that image. So you can see it's a relatively low-quality image. And they posted it in a post in Reddit, and I'm not sure if Your Honor is familiar, but Reddit's a collection of message boards. They're divided by topic, so this was the message board titled XJW, as in Ex Jehovah's Witnesses. And our client posted the image under a post that had the headline, and I'm probably going to quite get the headline of the article, not quite, but what gift should you give Jehovah? Guess what? And then if you open this up, you'd see the picture, and people commented, and I believe that's one of the exhibits Watchtower submitted. So what our client did is transform the image, not only in terms of it's a much lower resolution, non-reproducible image, but by giving it a completely new and different purpose. On the back page, that advertisement was requesting and instructing people on how to make online donations. When our client took that image and put it on a message board for self-described ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they weren't trying to get donations for anyone. They were trying to inform and spark commentary, and specifically to point out the fact that the whole back page was being used for something that looked like an ad, and that this was a change from past practices. And that's the comment. And changing a use so that it's for purposes of nonprofit commentary, that is a classic fair use called out in the text of the Copyright Act.
Okay. And so, Mr. Polidoro, if you were to allege copyright infringement against darksilver, what would you say? Would you claim statutory damages, or would you claim actual harm?
Statutory damages, Your Honor.
And is it because you think that there's harm? There's some inherent harm in taking the document, the advertisement, and putting it in posting it on some other forum?
Yes, and if I may explain the harm. Watchtower, for many, many years, was a publishing concern. So in the legal arena, Watchtower asserted their freedom of press, speech, and religion. In a very short amount of time, Watchtower has now become a digital media entity. And we have not taken steps previous to this to actually enforce our copyright interests. So when I was assigned to look at this, I looked at the universe of lawlessness on the internet with respect to the theft of our intellectual property. So what we're doing now is we're taking steps to protect the channel of spiritual fruit, jw.org. That if someone wants to find out about Jehovah's Witnesses, they want to see our publications, they come to our website. And so in this instance, this was a wholesale use of an article on jw.org. And the only commentary were the words, guess what, with a question mark. We feel that we were entitled to do the DMCA subpoena, to proceed on copyright infringement, to proceed for statutory damages, because it will start to send a message out that Watchtower will now vigorously enforce its intellectual property rights.
Okay. And what about the chart? What claim are you going to be seeking against darksilver with regard to the chart?
Your Honor, there's two aspects with respect to the chart. First, and I know as Your Honor knows, we can register the chart in an expeditious manner if we're going to move forward on a copyright infringement suit, so that's not an obstacle. But I think it shows a measure of willfulness that I think is an appropriate assessment for a court to make when they're considering the level of statutory damages. This was something that darksilver knew was not to be disseminated to the public. It was something that something he or she obtained.
I don't think the confidentiality of a copyrighted document goes to willfulness under the copyright standard, does it?
Well, I think, Your Honor...
Because the whole point of copyright is that it's...
But I think even if we were going to produce it, we have the right of first production. And that right of first production was taken from us.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that's also an aspect that a court can consider in assessing damages.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. Let me give each side a chance to say your last words, and then I'm going to take it under submission, because I do want to think about some of the things that's said today.
What I really want to emphasize, Your Honor, are the meritlessness of Watchtower's claims based on the undisputed facts that are right now before this court, facts that won't be changed with any additional information. Everything that we've heard today confirms that this is really about trying to control the flow of information in ways the Copyright Act is not about. Copyright harm requires that the new work could somehow be a substitute or supersede the use of the original. The only theory here of any kind of market harm, which is arguably the most important factor for fair use, is this notion that people who might go to jw.org, which may add that advertisement on its face says the information is available for free there, that they would somehow instead go to Reddit. They would find the XJW subreddit. They would scroll down to find this post, and somehow that where there's one page, would substitute for the entire magazine. That is not logical. and it's not supported, Watchtower has access to its own web logs. If it really thought there was a diversion in web traffic, that's evidence it has that it could support. It's chosen to rely on attorney speculation, which this court can disregard because it's not evidence. And to turn one point to the chart that was just stated, I heard right now a reference to the right of production, but of course in Watchtower's papers, they've said the chart wasn't intended for publication. And again, whatever may or may not be confidential, that's not a copyright issue. And to the extent it is, there is nothing original, creative, or registered that could possibly be copyrighted by Watchtower in that chart.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Palger?
Your Honor, Watchtower has a right to enforce its intellectual property protection. I'm put into a very unusual position almost to defend myself, that my real purpose here is not to pursue copyright infringement, but it's to engage in some witch hunt against dissenters. Watchtower has fought vigorously over decades for free speech rights. It has nothing to do with free speech. This has everything to do with stealing our intellectual property. We've complied with the law, we've followed with the law, and now I'm almost in a position to disprove something that doesn't exist. And how can one legitimately do that? If darksilver's claim is given legitimacy, every subpoena that we issue will now face this same argument, that whoever the infringer is, they maintain their anonymity, and they said we have a fear of persecution and repercussions.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take this under submission. I really appreciate the comments and the papers, and I will take a look again at some of the cases that you cited today.
Thank you, Your Honor, for your time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Court's in recess.